That's what you get for loving me. That's what you get for loving me.
Greetings from Castle Goring, from Mickey, Aurora, and from me. The heatwave continues. I am not going to complain, although I am going to very quickly get the fur babies off me. And I will warn you, the first questions are on something, well, legal matters and rather serious political matters. And then we go on to the rather lighter weight and juicier stuff. So the first question is twofold. It's from APS. And the first part of it is, Lady C, can you comment on the P Diddy verdict from the perspective of an outsider who has a highly developed sense of right and wrong and knows her way around the law? And the second part of the question relates to Samantha Markle's case. And I'm going to deal with that part first. Actually, I have received from Samantha herself some information. So if I may, I will refer to it if I can find it. Sorry. Here we go. Yes. First of all, several people have wanted to know, not only APS, if the case is still alive. The case is very much alive, but the first part of it is going to be heard in, I'll tell you exactly the date because I have it here from her, if I can increase the size of this. Tuesday, September the 9th. 24-11-091. Samantha Markle, appellant versus Meghan Markle. That is an appeal against the decision of Justice, I think it's called Judge in America, Honeywell's ruling, because Judge Honeywell took an extremely generous to Meghan point of view of the matter. And they are arguing that Judge Honeywell actually ruled incorrectly and that she should have come to a different conclusion and did not. So there's that. Then, after that, if the appeal is allowed, basically on the grounds that Judge Honeywell's ruling was wrong, and it is wrong because she did not consider the impact that Meghan's conduct would have upon her sister, which was, in my opinion, actually rather crazy. And some people would say that she was prejudiced in favor of the sister. That's certainly what a lot of people thought. I hope that that's not the case, because otherwise she really would have been playing a very dirty. But she clearly has not given sufficient consideration to the true meaning of Meghan's words and the damage that Meghan wrought. Now, if that succeeds, she is then on to the next part of it, which will be, once the appeal is allowed, then the case is retried. And Megsy Baby might find it very difficult to wriggle her way out of that one, especially as how Harry can be deposed. The state of Florida has both English common law and old-fashioned European inquisitorial law, which means that you can actually subpoena a spouse. That was information that was sent to me by a royal. They went to the trouble of finding it out and made sure I was able to pass it on to Samantha. I say that for what it's worth. Then the P Diddy verdict. Well, I am no great moralist where the law is concerned. I think the law is about justice. It's not about morality, it's about justice. And I think that the jury came to the right decision in this instance. They did not find Sean Combs guilty in terms of trafficking or in terms of racketeering, which were always stretches, in my opinion, but they did find him guilty on transportation for prostitution, based upon the evidence of two women whose evidence was quite firm about the fact that basically they were in it for the money, whichever way you cut it. That is a form of selling yourself, which is, so I think that's the right judgment for the court to have come to in that regard. I do think that the fact that Sean Combs is black has helped him tremendously, just as how the fact that Harvey Weinstein was white did not help him tremendously. I think that there is often in the media the pushing for the underdog in terms of racial history to be given a far fairer hearing than somebody who is not perceived as being an underdog will receive. Of course, Sean Combs is truly decadent and has done some pretty appalling things that I certainly do not agree with and I certainly would not condone. But it doesn't alter the fact that he was not a racketeer and nor was he trafficking. These women sold themselves irrespective of whether they said they were afraid or not, or that they were worried, or they were ambitious, or they were whatever. There's no doubt they sold themselves. And therefore, it is the correct verdict. He is a first-time offender, irrespective of the fact that it's a high-profile case and he's well known. He is a first-time offender, and that should be taken into account for sentencing. Now, I am taping this before the sentencing announcement is out. I suspect this is going to be broadcast before there is any possibility of a sentence being rendered. First-time offenders are usually treated with a degree of leniency that repeat offenders are not. And the fact that he is rich and the fact that he is a celebrity should not militate against him. If it does, it is Keir Starmer justice, which I am dead against. Justice should be blind. And the fact that he is rich should not increase his sentence. the fact that he is a celebrity should not increase his sentence. The fact that he's black shouldn't decrease his sentence, but I suspect it most likely will somewhat. Although it has to be said that was not the case in another well-known actor whose name I'm not going to mention, because he was released from prison when it turned out that the verdict was incorrect. But I think many of you will know who I'm speaking about. Let's wait and see what happens. I think justice should be fair. I don't think it should be too harsh. And really, insofar as I am concerned, I take a very, very 1960s liberal view of people who transgress in the carnal way. I'm not a Puritan. I am a prude, but I'm not a Puritan. I'm a prude personally, but I'm not a Puritan. And I don't think that nowadays Puritanism should mean that somebody gets a hugely long sentence for the fact that he was able to buy people willingly. Yes, he's been extremely abusive to women, but the statute of limitations prevents him from being tried or found guilty in that regard. And that should therefore not militate against him. Because any way you cut it, these women, I'm sorry, they sold themselves. I know. When I was younger, I was offered great sums of money and jewelry and all the rest of it to encourage me to turn a 2-letter word called no into 3-letter word called yes. And I never did. And saying, oh, she was only 19. I'm sorry, 19 is old enough to know that if you are a decent girl, you do not succumb to temptation. And if you do, you should swallow your medicine. You should not shift the blame for your sins onto someone else just because they encouraged you to be a sinner. Each person should bear his or her sins on his or her back and no one else's. That's my take on it. And I'm sorry if some people think I'm not being harsh enough, but that's how I genuinely feel. And now we come to the other thing, which is from somebody who is from an extremely famous background, who had an extremely eminent position in one of the American administrations, and who is extremely sophisticated and savvy. And he has asked me, have you heard about President Trump calling Candace Owens to stop her from discussing the doubts about Brigitte Macron's true gender? Do you have any thoughts on this and the possibility that President Macron threatened to withhold assistance in the ending of the Ukraine-Russia conflict until Trump did something about it? Love to you and the fur babies. Love to you too, and thanks for this. I think it's outrageous. And Candace Owens came right out and dished the dirt. She did it with a time lag, which is to her credit. And there is no doubt that everything she says is both true and fair. And I actually think good on Trump for getting in touch with her directly, because what I find interesting is that many presidents and world leaders would have dodged the bullet and not contacted her directly, but he did. And he emphasized how important it was that she, to President Macron and his wife Brigitte, that she desist from her investigations into Brigitte Macron's former identity. And Candace Owens makes a very good point, because this friend of mine, who's so politically and otherwise well connected, who's alerted me to all of this, sent me the tape, and I looked at it. And Candace Owens makes the absolutely correct point, morally and politically, that it is an absolute disgrace that President Macron could be so irresponsible as to be threatening President Trump with withholding his cooperation in bringing the war in Ukraine to a conclusion, because Candace Owens is accusing his wife of having changed gender. So this perplexes me on many levels. I agree with Candace Owens that it is an immoral, in fact, it is an amoral thing, highly irresponsible for Macron to have done. And incidentally, his name is not pronounced President Macron. He may be your crone, he may be even Brigitte's crone, but he's not Macron. He is Macron. But I think it is outrageous that he could be so irresponsible as to put his and his wife's personal comfort before the lives of so many people. It's outrageous. It shows a lack of proportionality that is actually frighteningly amoral. To me, it also raises the question, if she is not a transsexual, what's the big deal? She knows she's a woman. She knows she was born a woman. She knows she's a woman now. What difference does it make to her and to him? I mean, can they be so petty and bourgeois as to be so embarrassed? I mean, give me a break. These are people who are supposedly world leaders, and they are obsessed with such trivialities and gossip. I mean, if it's not true, what's the big deal? And if it's true, what's the big deal? Really, what's the big deal? So, she's a transsexual. Big deal. I mean, either way, they are making far more of it than they should be making. They should be rising above it. And neither of them should be using the lives of innocent people to force silence upon Candace Owens. I keep an open mind on all of this, but I have to tell you, when people do things like that, you begin to wonder, is there really truth to that rumor? And on that note, I will move on to what Marianne Dixon says. I'm totally disgusted that the resident monarch has scrapped the royal train. The late Queen shed a tear when the yacht was stood down, so it would break her heart to see the royal train go the same way. Maybe that's the ultimate plan. The monarchy ends with Charles. Well, I don't think that's the plan. I also, in fairness to the king and the late Queen, do not think that one can liken the royal train to the royal yacht Britannia, which the Queen regarded as a home. It was the only time in the whole of her life where she was relatively inaccessible, even more so than up in Scotland at Balmoral. And she loved Britannia as if it were her home. And that's why she cried when it was being decommissioned. And I think it's a big mistake that the government made in not building another royal yacht, because I think that it would have been very, very productive for business deals all over the world, because it used to be. I know people who signed deals that they had no intention of signing because they were asked onto the Britannia and they were entertained on the Britannia and they signed the deals on the Britannia. The problem with politicians is they, by and large, know nothing about business, they know nothing about money, they know nothing about making money. Oh, they know an awful lot about spending everybody's money, but they don't know anything about the creation of wealth. And therefore, they don't understand the mindset of people who are wealth creators. This is a huge problem, and an increasingly huge problem in a world that looks down upon the creation of wealth and thinks that the distribution of wealth is possible without the creation of wealth. Because if you pick all the money off the money tree, there's no money left. So to put it in a slightly different analogy, if you pick all the apricots off the apricot tree, there are no more apricots to be had. And until the next lot of apricots come in, you're not going to get apricots. And if you have stripped that apricot tree of the ability to reproduce, which is what a lot of government policies do nowadays, there's going to be no more apricots from the apricot tree. So let's leave it at that. And we're getting on to lighter stuff now. And hopefully you haven't minded the heavier stuff. Home with Emma says, I adored Liz Anson. They had a son, Jonathan, from Jeffrey. Yes, he was married before. And a daughter, Fiona, together. Couldn't remember her name. Liz had an outrageous sense of humour as well as a flying temper. Never a dull moment. As I said the other day, she was not my favourite person. I didn't dislike her, but I didn't like her. I didn't warm to her. And if I don't warm to somebody, I'm afraid, I don't care who they are, I'm not prepared to go the extra mile. Hypocrisy has never been my strong point or weakness. But I'm not surprised that she had a terrible temper. Many, many people do, including me. So, Rosie Girl says, Lady C, can you please comment on the essay in the Daily Mail in regards to Lady Elizabeth Anson's diary entries about the Harkles and our dear late Queen's feelings towards the marriage, etc.? Thank you. Well, I think I've already done something on it, so I'm going to limit it. Liz Anson was the Queen's cousin. I think I said that. She was a Queen's cousin. She was a first cousin once removed. Her mother, Princess Anne of Denmark, who was born Miss Anne Boslan, was the Queen's first cousin, a brother and a sister's children. And I said the other day to what extent Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, went to promote the match between her niece, her divorced niece. Remember, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, didn't like divorce, but she bent the rules where her niece was concerned and effectively nobbled the King of Denmark to allow the marriage between her non-royal niece, the divorced Viscountess Anson, and Prince George of Denmark. And she succeeded. According to Prince George, who I knew somewhat, Elizabeth Anson was the greatest social climber you would ever run across. This was her stepfather saying it. So I did point out to him that I didn't see where she had to climb to, and he said, well, of course she does. He said words to this effect. She wasn't born royal. She wasn't royal. And he was right. Beyond aristocracy is royalty. And Liz Anson was not royal, never was. But my dear, she stuck to royalty the way armpit sticks to deodorant and Meghan sticks to any man that is going to advance her in her worldly ambitions. Everything that has come out simply confirms what I and other people have been saying, and I'm delighted that it is out, and I'm delighted that Sally Bedell-Smith has been dishing the dirt, and she knew Elizabeth Anson well. They were friends. Sally Bedell-Smith was a contributing editor at Vanity Fair, and Liz Anson loved publicity, and she also loved being very social, and so they had a friendship that was based doubtless upon liking each other, but there was a tremendous amount of advantage to be gained, and I'm not knocking it. If you can be true friends and there are worldly advantages, who am I to decry it? So, but I have heard interesting things of Sally Bedell-Smith, and I certainly had reservations about Liz Anson. Let's leave it at that. But everything she's revealed is everything that ratifies everything I have been saying all along. And so I'm very pleased. And it shows the tremendous disappointment the late Queen had in Harry. It shows how ruthless Meghan is. It shows how in her thrall Harry was. All things that when I wrote Meghan and Harry, the real story, and it was published in 2020, if I remember correctly, I was roundly lambasted for by the very writers and authors and journalists and media personalities who are now saying, oh, isn't it wonderful that Liz Anson has revealed how the Queen truly felt? Well, slightly different words, same sentiments. And I'm very gratified. It's always nice to have confirmation from other sources. So I will leave it at that. Angela Crest says, I believe that Meghan Markle planned to build a brand expecting to be able to sell it for billions. Good luck on that one. There's no doubt that that is exactly what Meghan Markle set out to do. Meghan Markle entered the royal family having, as I pointed out in my book, Meghan and Harry, the real story, seducing various members of the royal family into thinking she was one sort of person when indeed she was another. And those who didn't fall for the act and saw through her from the word go, including Prince William, Catherine, Prince Philip, and Princess Anne, were, I think it would be fair to say, viewed with a very beady eye by the more open-minded and generous members of the royal family, who thought that because they were open-minded and generous, that they could suspend, well, actually, I was going to say they could suspend their powers of perception, but they simply didn't have them. And I include the King and the late Queen in that number. The Queen and Prince Charles are both, well, she's dead now, but I'm going to speak in the present tense, both quite sentimental in some ways, well, open emotionally would be a better way of putting it, and would go the extra mile to give somebody a chance. Well, Prince Philip, Princess Anne, Prince William, and Catherine say, actually, something about this isn't right. I am going to withhold my seal of approval. I'm going to give them a chance, but I'm going to give them a chance with a very beady eye. The Queen and Prince Charles were, well, I'm going to give them a chance. Let's see how it works out. I'm Christian. I'm optimistic. And we see how it worked out. Now, I have to say, I fall between both stools in my personal life. Sometimes I give people a chance, other times I don't. And every time I've given somebody a chance and my actually intuition and incisive judgment, I have lived to regret it. The Queen certainly lived to regret the fact that things turned out the way they did, and that Harry kicked so much dust in her face. But Meghan, she went into that relationship, and I quoted in my original book Gina Nelthorpe Cowan saying that Meghan is fundamentally a businesswoman whose focus is on the bottom line. And this is what everyone in the royal family ended up appreciating. Meghan went in knowing that she was a stronger personality and that she was brighter than Harry, and that she could maneuver and manipulate Harry and get him to do exactly what she wanted. Oh, believe me, Meghan's a very good cook. She knows all about roasting chicken, and she knows that the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. especially when she's feeding him roasted chicken. Not to mention waffles. Oh, I'm such a crocodile. Well, she knew what she was about. It had worked before and it worked again. But basically, Meghan has always been, if you look closely at the trajectory of her life and the trajectory that I'm groping for a polite way of putting this. If you view Meghan's advancement, let's start over from her starting point to where she is now. She has targeted men, all of whom, according to her father, she would choose. Meghan would look at a strange man across a room, so she had a very good judgment as to what would work and wouldn't work and with whom. She has a very good instincts in terms of manipulating people and in terms of getting to their weaknesses and vulnerabilities and their sensibilities. Doesn't always work. She tried the technique with William. It didn't work. All the phony baloney and didn't move him. But it moved Harry, and it moved Trevor Eggleston, and it's moved other men. There are other men who it moved. Take it from me. I've spoken to more than one of them. But it's always been about, what can I get out of that man? How is that man going to serve me? How is he going to serve my interests? How can I present myself as being somebody who will be loving and kind and enthusiastic? There's nothing I wouldn't do for you. I love you so much. She has it down pat. But that's the vehicle. That's not the objective. The vehicle is the man. The objective is wealth, position, influence, and attention, including from the man who is her victim and her vehicle. So there's no doubt she went into the royal family thinking, and I'm going to be able to just ride a roughshod over all of them. And she did, except it didn't work. But you see, she tried and succeeded with the charm. And then once she felt sufficiently comfortable, once she knew the marriage was certain to take place, she started to ride roughshod over everybody, including the late Queen. And she had Harry riding roughshod over the late Queen. I refer you back to what Liz Anson told Sally Bedell Smith to confirm what I have been saying all along. Her miscalculation, and again, this is nothing new, that because I'm going to be repeating what I've said, but in this context, I'm answering the question. She understood that if she played the colour card and I'm a self-made professional woman and I can modernize everybody and you all need me. And I mean, at Buckingham Palace, they used to say she was messianic because she'd stomp in and tell everybody what to do and that she knew better than anybody. And it didn't work, but she was trying to make sure it would work. because she was there to dominate not only Harry, but the rest of the family and the whole of the institution. She was going to mold it to her image of what she wanted for herself and therefore wanted it to be, so that she could exploit it for money, increasing fame, and undying attention. The money part of it is where the brand comes in. Her brand is not only, though, about making money, and again, I have said this before, her brand is about, I am superior to all of you. I know better than you. I am an authority figure to whom you should be deferring. And if you do not, it's because you are insufficient. You should all be deferring to me because I am the great I. I hope that answers the question. Suzanne Jesus says, does Meghan even have a garden? The garden where I've seen her belongs to the owner of the mansion where she films as ever. Meghan does have grounds. She does have grounds. I know people who've seen the grounds. Does Meghan have all the things that she pretends she has? Do pigs fly? Where are my pigs? Oh, I've got to get my pigs. Here we go. Sorry, my pigs have been moved. I'm getting my pigs. Do pigs fly? Even pigs with lipstick? What about Mr. Piggles? Does he fly? These pigs fly. Does the Markle pig fly? No matter how much she flaps her wings, if she jumps off the side of a building, she's going to go the way of Simon the Sorcerer, straight down. All her attempts at flight are going to end up being nothing but a fright. But I understand they do have grounds. The garden that she is constantly photographed in, several people have pointed out it is not her garden. What can I tell you? Is this another one of Meghan's authenticities? I think we know the answer to that. Lena Love says, the wine is from Kundaí winery in California. I don't know how it's pronounced, sorry. She just slapped her label on the product. Kundaí sells it directly from their website for $40. This beige blush is a cooking wine or dessert wine. Tea bags are from Republic of Tea. If you buy directly from Republic of Tea, you pay 30 cents per tea bag. From Meghan's website, you will pay $1 per tea bag. Seems she is a drop shipping business. Meghan is doing what many other people have done. She is selling a dream, and the dream is a lie. It is based on a lie, and it is a lie. Anybody can say, oh, I have created a jam, and oh, that has inspired a recipe that is they might have done something slightly different to make it uniquely hers, like the owners spit in the vat. That would make it unique. Not that I'm accusing them of doing that, but I think you get my point. And it's all a con. It's a massive con. It's called a marketing exercise, to be more polite about it. But is it going to fly? Any day she flies, it will fly. Terry Trammell says, no matter what Meghan does, she will always be a failure. She has no talent in any field except for being a habitual liar, and Harry is running a close second. Terry Trammell, I don't agree with you. Meghan has an absolute genius for attention. And this is something that we need to recognize, because if we say Meghan has no ability whatsoever, it's easier for us to be duped by her. Yes, she is a fantasist. She does come out with the most fantastical claims. She is not a very good liar. I mean, I don't understand how anybody who is supposedly intelligent could put a ripe apricot in her hand surrounded by unripe apricots. So you have green apricots with one ripe apricot, and she's picking that from the tree. I just don't understand how somebody can be so mindless and obtuse and flatter herself into thinking that she actually is so clever that she is a detailed person and every detail is attended to, when in fact not one of them is attended to, because that's a sort of cack-handed stupidity that only an imbecile or a child or somebody who is so overwhelmingly arrogant that they would think, well, I'm so great and great. I can say what I want to, do what I want, and everybody's going to believe me. Christina Scallion has a very, very good observation to make. And I'm going to repeat it because I actually agree with it wholeheartedly. Harry gave Meghan fame or infamy. However you choose to look at it, she's famous, and that's all she ever wanted. I would have substituted the word known for famous, because she's infamous. And there is a difference between fame and infamy. But I take your point, so I'm going to repeat it, but I'm going to substitute the word. However you choose to look at it, she's known all over the world, and that's all she ever wanted. I had never heard of her before she married. If you reach your late 30s as an actress and haven't achieved a certain level of success, you probably never will. She hardly left a busy career to marry Harry. She left a dying career. Yes, she did. She was being written out of Suits, and she knew it. She also knew that she was never going to get another Suits. She was playing the sexually desirable bimbo that bonks her way to the top using her tongue and her brains and her nerve. So Rachel Zane was very, very much a Meganian character, and Meghan is very much a Rachel Zane character. In fact, Rachel Zane was more capable than Meghan, although Rachel Zane couldn't pass her exams. Meghan has been able to pass her exams, a distinction Harry does not possess. Had she not married Harry, she would have gone down the route which she asked Lady Kundaí to help her with, which was to marry a rich Englishman. Because, you see, she understood, she was clever enough to understand that in Canada and in the United States, her lack of background in terms of what she would call classiness and what we in civilized circles would call background, and her lack of background allied to her I'm trying to find a polite way of putting this, her lack of, well, I'm just going to say it, because she just wasn't distinguished enough. She just wasn't grand enough. She just wasn't good enough. She just wasn't anything enough to make a good marriage. And she understood it. She had reached the pinnacle with Trevor Eggleston and with Corey Vitiello. And as far as she was concerned, they weren't good enough for her. She wanted us to make a splendid match. Or if she couldn't, she wanted to make a match with a rich man who was famous. And that wasn't that easy in America because she just didn't make the grade. She'd made it with Trevor. She'd blown it with Trevor, even though she left him. Though Trevor, let's remember, was doing pretty well, and there's no way and Trevor has ended up doing extremely well, and there was no way that Meghan was ever going to end up marrying in the United States or America this caliber of man she thought she had graduated to. She wasn't going to marry one of the McGuinnesses. One of my cousins married one of the McGuinnesses, a very rich Canadian family. She wasn't going to be good enough to marry a McGuinness. Sorry. She wasn't good enough to marry the American top drawer either. So she cleverly decided to move her search party to the United Kingdom, and it worked brilliantly. And it has often worked brilliantly. Women that have not been desirable in the United States of America, if they were American and came over here, they lost a lot of the scorn that certain types of Americans would endow them with, to be polite. Well, once they're in England, they're American, and to an extent that smoothed out the edges, and it did. And there is no way that she was ever going to succeed in Hollywood. She was batting 40. She wasn't good looking enough. She wasn't a good enough actress. And she wasn't liked. Meghan was disliked roundly by people who knew her well. My children have a friend who was a member of that circle in Canada. And she says that Meghan was despised by many people. Meghan in Hollywood, as soon as people heard the name, half the time they wanted to run. Why do you think she's still not a success? Even though she's a duchess, even though she went to America covered in royal glory. Why do you think she's not a success? Because she just doesn't have it. Whatever it is, she lacks it. But she's got what she wanted to a point. She's known, she's renowned, but she's not famous. She is infamous, and she is loathed in certain circles, and she is despised in others, and she is respected and revered in ever diminishing circles. And with the passage of time, that will continue. Water seeks its own level, and Meghan's ditch is about to run dry. Wait for it. And on that note, I will say one last. Casey says, I don't think Meghan Markle is very clever. She only needed to be more clever than Harry, and luckily for her, that wasn't terribly difficult. I couldn't agree more. I think Meghan is somebody who thinks she's very clever, and she's too clever by half and stupid by whole. I have seen it in many other people over the decades that I have been on this earth. People who are actually really quite clever, but egotistical, narcissistic, full of themselves, overestimate their own attributes and therefore underestimate everybody else's. That's not a very clever way to be. If you're going to be a good adversary, you should at least estimate accurately the strengths of your opposition and your own weaknesses. If you don't, you might be able to brazen it out in the short term, but in the long term, you are going to be the architect of your own destruction. And that is what has happened with Meghan. Because, she's clever enough. She's clever enough to have hustled those little buns. Well, certainly, I don't know about the buns being that little. Certainly the fried eggs are something that wouldn't rise much above a crackle on the pavement. But she's certainly known how to use all her assets. And let's not knock her, because let's not underestimate her abilities. She has gone with tremendous ambition, tremendous determination, a degree of intelligence, very ordinary looks, rarely, but the will to succeed has been so monumental that she has turned herself from an ugly duckling into the approximation of a reasonably attractive swan with all the aids required. But she has gone from being really a very plain, not particularly nice person into a royal duchess. Now, that is an accomplishment. I don't care which way you cut it. The fact that she has now exposed herself doesn't mean she hasn't accomplished what she has accomplished. It simply means that she wasn't clever enough to seize the advantage and not squander it. So she has been clever, but not as clever as she thought she was. Because if she had really been clever, she would have given herself the time to watch and wait and then make her move. She would not have been arrogant and overbearing. She would have been watchful, and she would have been weighty Megsy baby, and she would have got everything she wanted, but she couldn't wait. She was too arrogant. She was too impatient. She thought she was better than she is, and she thought she was better than people who are infinitely better than she was. So, but she was certainly able to dupe Harry, because he is very challenged, not only intellectually, but in other ways. And also, she was able to use his physicality to her advantage. So on that note, I'll say thank you very much for listening. I hope this has been of some interest to you. If it has, please keep the questions and comments coming in so I will know what you would like us to be speaking about. Okay, thank you so much. Take good care and Godspeed. And if you have truly enjoyed this, would you care to like, share, subscribe, press the notification bell, and bye-bye.